Good morning and welcome to this week's episode of Saturday Conversations, a podcast. We can go a little deeper with some familiar faces, within the Pittsburgh sports scene. The NHL trade deadline was yesterday, so I thought it would be a good time to talk to the man on the other side of your screen, Colby Armstrong, first-round pick of the Penguins in 2001. Colby was dealt to the Thrashers on you were dealt to the Atlanta Thrashers.
That's correct. Yeah.
How are you, by the way?
You probably don't remember the team. That's why no one talks about it. It's out of sight, out of mind with the Thrashers. But yeah, doing well, really busy, obviously busy this time of the year. And what a crazy run with Four Nations and the trades that happened before Four Nations and the tournament itself. And then right in the trade deadline. I mean, NHL is just on fire right now with all the action around it. And a lot of fun leading up to the end of the season here. Just like a mad sprint to the finish almost.
You don't stop, man.
No, I know. I get some days off, yeah, but few and far between. And I don't mind it, actually. I don't mind. I'm only 42 years old, so I'm just having fun. And I mean, I don't know what else. I'd always say this. I don't know what else I'd be doing if I wasn't like involved in hockey somehow. And I think I found a thing that I've gotten good at and become more comfortable with, and being able to cover it at different networks and working with tons of different people and being able to do tons of different things in and around the game at the highest level has been like a dream come true. It's been awesome.
You have gotten really good, man. I love your style. Like it's technical. Like you can tell me what's going on in a hockey game. You can also make me laugh and keep me entertained and keep me engaged. Like you you were good from the start, but it's like really gotten incredible.
Yeah, thank you.
I told you that before, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just getting comfortable with yourself in these roles and being able to do different, like hosting, like what you're doing right now. I do that on my own pod with game notes and on with the Spit and Chicklets and Barstool, and then doing interviews and sit downs. Like that's super uncomfortable for me. That's like super hard to do, I find. But the more I do it, the more comfortable I get. So it's like reps with anything and doing it. And like, also it's like, it's hockey. It's a game. It's fun. People love it. Like when you show up people at a game, they're like have giant beers in their hands and they're hugging their friends and they're cheering. And like, that's what it is. And so, if I can provide a little bit of that too, the entertainment part and have fun with it, I think I generally think people like that and want to enjoy it with you. So that's what sports is about.
Yeah. So part of this pod, Colby, and I told you this, talk about your process, how you got started into things and all that. I do want to tie up one loose end relative to the trade, though. For anybody who's been living under a rock, Colby was traded along with Angelo Esposito, Eric Christensen, and a 2008 first-round pick, I believe, for Marian Hossa and Pascal Dupuis. Ironically, I think while you were taking a nap, we're going to talk about that. Now he works for Sportsnet Pittsburgh and Rogers Media. Am I saying that correctly in Toronto? You bounce back
Rogers. Yeah, Rogers Sportsnet. I do some TNT down there as well, here and there, hit or miss, but keeps me busy, keeps me going. And that trade deadline, that was crazy. That's the first time I've been traded, like playing junior hockey. Like you can get traded. I've had friends get traded off teams, and when I was playing junior, and obviously at the NHL level as well. I've had trades happen where guys came to our team and I was like fast buddies with them. It was great. It worked out awesome. You never know what can happen, right? But that was my first like world got rocked move in hockey for me. And yeah, I was pregame napping at the hotel. We're playing the Islanders that night, and I was roommates with Sid at the time, but he was out with an injury. So when I showed up to the hotel, I had my own room, which is kind of weird because I was rather young at the time. And usually if like there's an empty room when you're having roommates, they'll like, coordinate it so that like, for example, like a Mark Eaton at the time who had several more games than me and several more years under his belt would like, yeah, you don't get a roommate. You guys can split up and we'll reorganize. So like the, younger guys can have roommates. If you're an older guy, you can kind of get your own room. So yeah, I was like doing the math in my head. I'm like, this is weird. But then it always like checked out like, nah, I'm Sid's roommate. That's why they did it. They're taking care of me because of Sid, superstar treatment. As they say.
I heard that before somewhere.
But it's I was pregame napping for that game and pretty much out of my mind. I wasn't thinking about it at all. And then my mom actually called me and woke me up at 3:00, right on the dot, like 3:01 or something.
That's like right at your nap's midpoint.
Yeah, that's 2 to 4. That's when I like to shutter. Yeah. So that's right in the middle. And my mom like knows, like, you don't call me on the game day, like I'm in the routine.
Right.
So it was rather odd. And she had been obviously watching wall-to-wall coverage of trade deadline up in Canada where we're from, and saw that I got traded. So she knew before I even heard about it and was the first person to call me. So if someone's going to wake you up from a deep pregame nap with a phone call and have some news that's going to rock your world a bit, it's best that it's mom. So I was good with that.
All right. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I do want to remind all of our viewers, listeners, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder and Associates. Law firms can come and go, but what law firm has been here in Western PA fighting for injury victims for over 40 years? Edgar Snyder and Associates. What firm has a staff of over 130 people who live and work here? Edgar Snyder and Associates. Law firms come and go, but Edgar Snyder and Associates is a name you can always trust. Remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. If you've been hurt in an accident, call them 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit them at edgarsnyder.com. They're available 24/7. So back to the trade.
What an ad read, buddy. Just dial it in the ad reads. There you go. Yeah, I love it.
Thank you. I can do one or two things right. I can generally nail the ad read. So, all right. Is it true? I think I watched a video on this and researching this pod that she didn't know the destination. She knew you were traded.
She knew.
She knew. Okay.
She knew. She wouldn't tell me though. I guessed it on the first guess just by her reaction to me asking where. She was like, "Oh."
How did you know it was Atlanta?
I don't know why. It was just popped into my head. And like the funny thing is too, like weeks before that, because Mark Recchi had been traded there.
Yeah. And
now it's awesome because Rex is in Pittsburgh now. I actually spent a lot of time hanging out with Rex, and good teammate, and actually was really great for me there. But I remember when he went there and talk about like guys moving around, I remember sitting at my house. I just bought a house that year too. And kiss of death, right?
I know.
I remember flipping through the channels and talking to my wife now, but girlfriend at the time, and being like, "Hey, like, can you stop on that Thrashers game? I just want to see Rex playing for." And I remember like watching Rex playing there, and I said to her, I was like, "That must be so weird, Don Waddell is actually their GM, and he's coaching. He's on the bench. It must be so weird, like having your GM on the bench." Mm-hmm. And thinking that literally 10 days later, I was sitting on that bench. It was so weird how it happened. And Don Waddell was standing behind me. Yeah. When I got traded there, but Rex was awesome for me down there. He picked me up every day, took me to the rink, took me to dinner, kind of was like my babysitter / chauffeur. And, he was awesome. So it's kind of funny now in retirement and living in Pittsburgh, I get to spend a lot of time golfing with him and hanging out, going for lunches, and has become a really great friend for me.
What are some of the logistical challenges? And I don't know if this is, down to like your stuff moving from city to city. You said your girlfriend and then your wife, maybe she took care of all that stuff. But like, what are things that people, other fans, on the outside, they don't understand about a player having to wake up in one city and then you all of a sudden live in another city?
Yeah, well, depending on your like family and life situation, there's that. I know there's mechanisms built in for trades for like moving and like what comes with that, like maybe any job, I'd imagine, if you have that with your job, or they give you like a stipend or pick up like moving. So there's
Colby,
that.
I can't get traded to anher paper.
Yeah. Well, that's the great thing about what I'm doing now. Like I can work anywhere and just travel in for it. And I don't have to like, flip my whole family upside down like you do in the hockey world.
Right.
So, but like the one thing that people, I can imagine, probably have an idea if you sit and think about it, but they don't know is like how much, if you have a wife and you have a family, how much they actually have to do. Like they have to hold it all together. They have to organize everything because you've got to go and like, you got to play hockey, you got to get to the next destination. Like when I got traded on the road, I didn't go home and like get all my stuff. I went from Long Island with a overnight bag. That's all I had. One suit and like, stuff that you take for overnight, like a toiletry kit and a couple of other little items in a little bag. That's all I had. So I got my equipment, my sticks, me and Eric Christensen, we went to the airport in Long Island in New York and flew to Atlanta, and I was there. And so on the back end of that, it's usually like, if it's not the wives and the girlfriends that are doing everything, like I mean everything, organizing, and you have to be you have to do it on the fly too, because everything switches. You're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to get through the rest of the year. Here's how we're going to play it out. This is what our next step will be. And usually it's either them or their parents, if they're younger guys, that will organize, pick up the pieces, keep things rolling, set plans in motion, and they do everything. So maybe a little hidden thing of these situations and of the league a little bit in hockey. That's what I know, but is how strong and like great the girlfriends and wives are and families are in picking up things and making things work to get through certain situations. So I went down there, actually stayed in a hotel, like a long-term stay hotel for the rest of that season until it was done, and then came back to Pittsburgh as they went on their Stanley Cup march to the Stanley Cup final that year, which was really great to watch, by the way.
Yeah. I wanted to pick at that a little bit. I'm sure that was super fun for you.
It was brutal.
Dude, and here's the way I wanted to frame the question, Colby. Do you ever see Ray Shero and do you give him crap about that?
He apologizes to me every time I see him. It's hilarious.
Okay. All right. I would never let that die personally. I know.
He apologizes every time. And the thing about it is we were a good team and we were getting good, right? We knew we were going to be good. And, making the playoffs the previous year, which is still like one of my, you made it to the NHL moment type of things when you're playing for the Stanley Cup and getting that experience that first year with the group that we had. And how close we were and how much fun we were having. And it was awesome. And to that summer, or right as soon as we lost out that year, to like us all talking to each other, like next year we're going to be ready to go. Like we already had it planned out. We were going to be good. And obviously Sid, like a driving factor in that and just his hunger. But that's what, that's the part that like stung, is like my best buddies, like 3.5 years in Wilkes with a lot of these guys too, or at least 2 years with some of them before they got called up, and they kept us down there marinating for a while before, bringing the whole crew up and turning things over. So I was just really close with everyone. We had such a good group of guys and, families and girlfriends, and everyone was so close. We did everything together. And I think through that, being a good team, was hard too. 'Cause it's like, we built to this, like it was hard times until we got good. But just the group in general. So Ray Shero, I run into him at the draft now or at other little hockey things that I'm working, and always have great times chatting with him and hanging out with him. And he always has a comment about, oh man, oh God, how will you ever forget? How will you ever forgive me? That was the hardest thing I ever had to do, and all this stuff. But a great guy, love seeing him. And then that's business, right? You had a chance at a Hall of Fame player, and he was the big ticket that year. And where was he going? I remember he was like going to Montreal. That was the big rumor, because they were in Montreal at the time, and Montreal had good teams over those years. And there was like a rumor that they had Hossa Montreal gloves already made up. And I remember hearing about all this. This isn't in like social media or internet yet. There's like none of this stuff. So it's kind of like word of mouth stuff. And then out of nowhere, right at the deadline, the Penguins and Ray came over the top with this package deal to get Hossa. So, it was, I think, rather shocking, not only for us in the trade, everyone in the trade. Well, at least Hossa knew he was getting traded, but I think it was just shocking because the Penguins kind of weren't on the radar at the time and came in and made a big splash in getting that particular player, which is a pretty darn good player.
No doubt.
Widely referred to as the Colby Armstrong trade, though, I might add.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. It's the most important piece of this trade, and we're glad we got you back. I just wish it would have been sooner for your sake. But anyway, all right. I want to talk a little bit about your broadcasting foray and transition into that and all the things you built. We do have a 30-second ad from the Bradenton Area Convention and Visitors Bureau, though. I want to play that real quick, and back with more with Colby after this.
Embrace the laid-back charm of island life while sinking your toes in the sand and discovering real, authentic Florida in the Bradenton area. Unspoiled beauty and pristine beaches, a vibrant waterfront downtown energized by local arts and culture, fresh Floridian cuisine with a flourish of rich history, and friendly locals ready to welcome you to this preserved paradise on Florida's Gulf Coast. Plan your visit today at BradentonGulfIslands.com.
Welcome back to Saturday Conversations, talking with Colby Armstrong. Now, Colby, you played in Atlanta 08, 09, 10, 2 seasons with Toronto, part of one in Montreal. Then I believe you started with Rogers in 14, 15, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I played a year in Sweden. I played a year in Sweden right at the end, and then came back and then started right away that next hockey season, dabbling in with Rogers Sportsnet up here in Canada. Yeah, they just got the big national rights deal at that time, and it was a big thing, and the restructuring of them taking over all the rights. And I just kind of I thought I might be good at it. I thought I wanted to do it. When I got traded from Pittsburgh in the final, Rogers Sportsnet at the time called me, and they didn't have any of the rights. So, but they did a big pregame show and then a postgame show. And they were on site in the final, and I knew the guys that work there, and they called me and they're like, "Hey, like, would you come to Pittsburgh and like be with us? It'd be great for like insight." And I'd never done TV. And so that was like a tough one, right? I'm like, oh God, I'm going to go to Pittsburgh. The fans are just going to be going nuts. I know how it's going to be there. And like, you know, this team, they could beat the Detroit Red Wings in the final, and I got to watch that, and it would be difficult. And I'm like, what should I do? And I, talking to my wife and my family and stuff over it, and they're like, you should do it. I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll do it. So I flew in, and that was my very first time ever sitting on like a panel or like, doing media.
Yeah.
And being on set, the whole deal, and seeing how it operates and how they work, and being able to do that. And I was working with Darren Millard, who was a long time there. He's now in Vegas. He's he's really good at his job. And Nick Kiprios was there as well, who's a pretty big heavy hitter up here in Toronto still with Rogers, and was on eventually was doing Hockey Night in Canada and stuff. So I was working with some really good broadcasters, and I kind of got the wheels turning in my head for post-career stuff. So I flew myself that first year in the summer when that deal got signed out to Toronto, and through people I knew and my agent at the time, set up a meeting with Rogers Sportsnet people and the head of their hockey department for media, and kind of pitched myself that like I'm interested in doing this. I'd like to get a chance, and had a little lunch meeting with them, and that was it. And then they said they agreed to bring me in. They bring me in like once a month for like 4 days at a time. I come in for 4 days and just kind of do everything, get on set, do some radio, do the car wash, they call it, like all the radio stations. You just bomb around all day doing it. So long days, 4 days, and getting some training in there, seeing how they run meetings, seeing how it works, seeing how you operate, seeing the preparation that it takes on that side. Like, things don't just pop up out of nowhere, which I seemingly thought as an idiot. It's like, how did they already have those highlights ready to go? What's going on? Like, you just
somebody
watch.
Has to cut though.
Yeah, somebody has to do all that stuff. You just think it does pops up onto. There's so much stuff going on. It's just crazy in there. So it was good for me.
They would have you do radio hits just like one after another to get experience. Like, how many in a day would you do?
Jump on a radio show, I'd co-host, I'd pop in, I'd do this. Cool. Eventually I started doing like Hockey Central at noon, which was like a huge show, simulcast on NHL Network.
Yep.
That's a big hockey show from noon till 1. Okay. And I'd co-host that every Monday, Tuesday, and started working in rotations, which we have guests on too. So you'd have to, be prepared for a round talk of the league. Not just like, the Penguins. Right. You have to know the league. So you have to watch like every game. You have to know what's going on. You have to know the players. You have to know the people. And then you get a guest on, and you have to, be prepared with questions and how you want to ask it. And I find that to be kind of like nerve-wracking to have to ask someone a question. It's hard. Even now, like in media scrums, I'm like, I stand in the back. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'll let the pros handle this. But
there's no pros. There's no secret, Colby.
Well, yeah,
we just have to not care about making a what out of ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah. Well,
plus you're a former player. You can just swoop in and do whatever you want.
I battle with that every day, not making a fool of myself, but it's something that's been like, all those kind of things that encompass like doing that. It's just getting reps, doing it, getting more comfortable. Like, I remember coming back to Pittsburgh and going in like the dressing room for the first time. I found that to be like so much anxiety, like terribly awkward for me. Yeah, it was just like weird. It's not my space. It's the team. And, coming from that side and then going in on the other side, kind of on the media side, it's like, I don't know. I felt like super awkward, but that is,
I agree with that.
That has gone down a little bit over the years, but I still have that feeling a little bit walking into their space in their room and, doing that part of the job. But that first year was awesome for me, just to get my feet wet, see what it was like. And get put in different opportunities. I'm thankful that they gave me that chance and let me do a bunch of different things at that time to kind of get my feet wet and learn and figure out what to do and pick people's brains and work with some incredible people as well. And that kind of got the ball rolling and has slowly built over. I think this is like my 10th year, maybe.
Wow.
Working
Let me go back here. Yeah.
Rogers. I don't know how long was the Rogers deal, because I've been there. That was the first year they had it. And the deal is, I think 14, it's up,
15.
I think it's up next year that finally is running out. And I've been with Rogers. I'm one of the few that is like kind of survived through the entire thing of staying involved in one way or another. So it's been awesome. I'm thankful for them. They've been great to me and allowed me to do some pretty cool stuff, and especially in my early days getting started.
So part of your early days, I think you worked some with Mike Lang, correct? Do you have any good Mike Lang stories? Any good?
Yeah, I was doing when I first came into Pittsburgh was the back-to-back cup years and being able to, hang around and be around a team, because when you're covering a team in studio or nationally, you're in one location, you're in a box in a room, and it's not the same as being at the morning skate and being at the practices and being around the people and covering the team. And Mike Lang was just like such a presence, but he was so cool. He was so chill about it almost. Yeah. He's like, yeah, baby. He's like, how he liked jazz music. He's very yeah, okay. Yeah, really laid back, cool, sitting there draped into the chairs watching pregame skate. And the coolest thing for me now looking back on it is Josh Getzoff and I both started at the same time. We did the pregame and postgame show on radio. That was our jobs. So picture us like two newer, younger guys that first year would throw it up. Now it's time to Josh, that's the Penguins live pregame show. We're going to throw it up to the Hall of Famer, Mike Lang, and the old 2-9er Phil. We did that all those years to start and being able to go to the final. And, the Penguins brought us to the final to do the pregame radio and post-game shows at the final and be there to cover it and be like boots on the ground and, be around those guys and work with Mike Lang and see how he covers a team and how he prepares. And, it was pretty amazing. I do remember back in the day, I don't know, when I was playing, I remember the big hubbubaloo or the big switch around of Mike Lang from TV to radio. Mm-hmm. As a player, I remember that being like a thing, and at the time, not, you're playing, so you're not worried about the business side of and what makes sense and, even financially what makes sense. But I remember that being a thing at the time of kind of a little tenseness in the air about Mike Lang and obviously what he means to Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh hockey. And, for the Penguins to keep him on their broadcast at the time, they did the radio. And it was more just separate. It was more separated with TV and radio. That was a big thing for the Penguins to have him come in on board. And the thing about radio is they did every game, so they did all the playoffs and everything. So to have him on there was incredible for all these years of greatness from him and his voice and his call on all those big moments. But throwing it up to him, man, that was a thrill. Looking back on it, that was amazing to be able to do that for the last several years while he was in there working.
So I want to transition a little bit to current topics around the team, but I'm going to use Sidney Crosby as a pivot point here. Being where you've been with him and now you're in media and he's on the player side, I'm assuming you use that as an opportunity to kind of say whatever you want to him. You can kind of get him going. I don't know, screw with him a little bit. Do you not? Do you leave him alone? How do you treat Sid as a member of the media now?
Yeah, I try to leave him alone. I will admit that I have taken advantage of being able just to text him or call him and hot stove, as I call it, just about hockey or the game. Yeah. And pick his brain and hear what he was thinking. And sometimes
Does he ever tell you to just stop it? Colby, enough.
No, but other people, when I've mentioned it to them, they're like, you do that? And I'm like, yeah. They're like,
still your friend.
Yeah, I know. I'm just a hockey guy. I like hot stove. And I honestly, I think he likes it too. He loves hockey. He loves talking about it. He loves breaking it down. But, through all of that, just wildly blown away about his thoughtfulness of, teams or situations. He's checked me up on things too, where it's they won their first cup in the back-to-backs. And I remember they had the same team coming back the next year. And I was just so casually like, oh, you guys are going to win again, you know? And he's like, yeah, we'll see if we can find our identity. I'm like, identity? Like, what do you mean? Like, you know?
Yeah.
You kind of separate yourself, and it's good to have him because he checks me up a little bit on like what it actually, remember when you were like in the room and this happened, like he's good at bringing it back around for me instead of just making casual like hot takes, you know? And it's like, hey, that's not how it works. And like, you know, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember. So it's he's been good to me that way, but I do abuse it a little bit. I do. I abuse
but it's not abusing. It sounds like you're relying on a source. You're relying on a source to keep you centered. That's the way.
But believe me, he's a brutal source. He doesn't give me much, but he does like talking hockey, and he does love. I do love checking in with him on certain times of the year and games, or like, you know, chatting with him about if he had a good big game or not, and breaking it down. So I love that I have that. I love that I'm able to do that. It's like for me doing this job now and being in Pittsburgh, and probably much like yourself and other media that have been around a long time and cover the Penguins, to be able to sit there and watch Sidney Crosby every night. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. I mean, what a great job.
And I'm guilty. I think we all are, of just taking it for granted that like this is always going to exist. And I try to get outside of my own brain sometimes and realize, like, look, there at some point there's going to be an end to this, and we should appreciate all. It doesn't mean we need to root for the end, but like, don't look past what we get to see every night. And speaking of which, takes me right into the next question. This storyline with him and the Avalanche, or being traded or whatever, I mean, it's a discussion point. I hate making it one because I don't think it's reality. I think Sid is bought in here as his friend, as his former. Like, what do you think when you see something like that? What's your lens on it?
Well, I think I understand it. I understand it, just the trajectory of where the Penguins are at right now, and you know, everyone can see it, and you know, and it's the circle of life, really, right? Like it happens. Every team goes through it. The Penguins were there. They got the draft picks. They got the players. They built, and then they've been a team that's, you know, always been on the tip of your tongue to win the Stanley Cup, and that's been the culture and the vibe and the feeling, and that's been around, you know, Sid with the Penguins. So that's been, you know, earned, and that's been something that they've, you know, taken care of over the years, of making sure that's the case as well. And Sid's passionate and dialed in about that. I think like Sid's a guy that like loves the game, appreciates everything. Like he's a guy that is very thoughtful about all his situations. And I think coming in at a hard time in Penguins history in a way, like, you know, a team that, you know, we did a lot of losing. He did a lot of losing, you know, in his first few years.
Yeah.
And building it and the care it takes and the work it takes to be a leader in that situation. I think he's mindful of, you know, where they're at right now, and what his impact can be on the Penguins right now, what they currently are in, I would say, you know, making sure that it's in a good place, you know. And I think the same. Yeah. I think he cares about that. I think he cares about Pittsburgh. He cares about the Penguins. He cares about the health of the organization, and he knows his impact on younger guys, and you know, the kind of that mentoring, teaching thing of like, you know, what it should look like, you know, when I do leave, and being a part of passing that kind of torch on.
Colby, he's got to think about kind of the way Mario went out too. Like it's that sort of, you know, you talk about circle of life, like, you know, when Mario ultimately retired, like it wasn't too long after he stepped aside that, you know, they went on and won and were good. Like I'd imagine Sid probably wants to close that gap even more, you know, experience some of the winning in his final years. But like, anyway, it's just, I
agree 100%. I agree 100%. Yeah.
You want to like leave it to these young kids and say, here, take this. Yep,
exactly. And I think he's like deep down, he's just a good, humble kid from small town Canada, and you know, his respect and love for the game, and I think, you know, ultimately that's how thoughtful he is, really. And I can understand why people would say that, like deep down, probably in my guts too. I'm like, oh man, can you imagine Sid on a playoff run, like on a cup contending team right now, and at his age, and having the chance for the NHL to win? Like we got 4 nations, right? Like 3 points in the first game. And it's like, you know, it's like Sid had to remind everyone he's still a guy. He's still got it. And that was awesome. And like, I think people like want that for him, you know, on that stage. and those moments. And then, and, you know, he's wildly like appreciated around the league. Like he goes in other buildings and like people are there to see him. People are there to cheer for his moments too, even on the road. So he's one of those guys I think people just want to see. And so I understand that thought process when people say that. You know, my partner on Chicklets there, Paul Bissonnette, really gets it strumming up when he wants to see him with Nate McKinnon, his buddy from his hometown. Yeah, and so that kind of gets everything going crazy. I got to admit, Sid did put the fire out on it. Like in a question, like it was, I believe it was before Four Nations, and he just said like, no, like this isn't happening. Like I'm a Penguin. Like this is where I am, and that's like the most, I think, pointed he's been in a response, which kind of just shut everything down. But you still hear them creeping in a little bit. People are still barking a little bit.
I know. All right, man. I want to get you out of here on this. I already went over with the time I promised you, but you're always gracious. To talk about Kyle Dubas and what he's trying to do. And I know it's a difficult needle to thread. I don't think they are, and I don't think they should punt on anything, you know, recently, but you do have to configure your team a different way, right? Like you have to get younger, you have to get, you know, they're compiling picks, they need prospects or whatever. How would you explain the plan of what Kyle Dubas is trying to do to get to the Penguins back to contention as quickly as possible?
Well, first of all, getting draft picks, getting younger that way. Second of all, trades, getting younger guys and having them in Wilkes-Barre and having them develop. I think development is a big thing. I think they're putting a lot, you know, their staff and, you know, Spezza and Amanda Kessel and what they're trying to do down in Wilkes-Barre and have success down there and build these guys up. Well, you know, we've seen Pickering come up for a bit and then he went back down. I think they hope that they can have like a run there and guys can kind of learn and play and develop and build. And at the same time, while doing that, now you have to have bodies in your lineup up top. So it's like, how do we get good enough guys up here that we can be competitive, we can be good, while not sacrificing, you know, giving away assets or moving on from draft picks. Like he's not moving on from he's bringing in draft picks. Everything he's done is to bring in a young guy, draft picks, prospects, and maybe a player to have a body in the lineup up in Pittsburgh. And so there's I think a conscious effort right now from Dubas and staff is to replenish, rebuild, develop, while also trying to maintain it up top. And so that's the line, right? That's the hard thing, I think, in trying to balance, you know, this, I guess, soft or rebuild or replenishment of the organization. Yeah. I don't blame them. Like, look at what Tampa Bay does. Tampa Bay has one first-round pick player in the first round up until 2027. So, like, their team, they have their core, they're younger guys. They got Gensel. They go out and make some more deals. They always seem to get their guys, but they don't care about their picks. They're trying to win Stanley Cups right now and forever. This is another thing I'm thankful for Pittsburgh all those years. And it might have buried the cupboards, but man, you got cups. You won. You got things done.
Nothing wrong with that, man.
And so now they're at a point now where the core group, you know, the core guys, the main three, that are here and trying to build some guys around those guys to like have a competitive team. But now you're at a point where you're like, okay, we can't do this forever, right? We have to now replenish, we have to rebuild. And so you can kind of see that happening here now with this Penguins organization, what Dubas is trying to do.
Yeah, man. Difficult decisions. Again, we're recording this before the trade deadline, so I'm not going to go into minutia or something like that, but it remains the same, whether it's around the trade deadline this offseason. Like, I just want to see him get it done fast. I want to see him make aggressive, smart moves. Yep. I don't want to look at 2-3 years of wilderness, Colby. I want to see them back and try to do this as quickly as possible. But
it's so weird, I think, as Penguins fans and us covering them, for them, like, you know, to be on the outside looking in or battling for the last wild card spot when we've been blessed with such greatness over the years and teams and competitive teams and teams that are there and teams that are on tip of everyone's tongue. So, and you look around the league, it's easier said than done, right? It's easier said than done. You look at like Chicago and you look at some of these other teams that did full rebuilds and like got rid of everybody. And it's like, oh boy, like you never know. You're not always as lucky as a ping pong ball dropping and you get Crosby and Malkin and Fleury and, you know, Stahl and all these guys that can springboard you. So it's got to work out. And that's your hopes in all of this.
Good stuff, man. Thanks so much for this, Colby. I appreciate it. Buddy. I know your life is busy. Always a pleasure.
Appreciate you.
All right. Make sure you like and subscribe. You can get all of this and so much more in our Post-Gazette North Shore Drive podcast and YouTube networks. For Colby Armstrong, I'm Jason Mackey. Thanks for watching Saturday Conversations.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.
Good job, buddy.